Okay, so yeah, welcome back to Standing in the Rubble. This is a conversation about the new landscape and how do we reposture ourselves and position ourselves and react and respond and adapt to the new landscape that we're in. What is God up to, and how does the church engage in kingdom and mission at this time? I'm joined by a friend of mine, Evan Garst, who leads Una Church in Kitchener over in Canada. He is pastor, he is a church planter, he coaches church planting, and a man who has a way with words and a lot of wisdom. So, Evan, welcome. Thank you for making the time.
Yeah, it's good to be here, Adam. Good to see you again, man.
Yeah, good to see you again. So, look, we're experiencing this over on this side of the Atlantic. You're experiencing it over in your side of the Atlantic. Like, what's it been like over in Canada? Tell me about the last couple of months from your perspective.
Well, I think massive adjustments that we've had to make over the last several months with quarantine and social distancing. It's been, everything has changed, right? Businesses, churches, family connections have been so different here. Talking to a couple that are at our church, and they hadn't seen their granddaughter in 3 months, only through a screen, and she was just born this past year. So it's been really challenging and difficult to be responsible, right? And figuring out even how does not being with someone show care and love and concern for them. Right? Like it's so it's counterintuitive, and it feels strange, and it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I think for this has been my space. I'm not sure that any time we've talked since meeting I've been outside this room. Right.
No, like that beautiful chair behind you is
that's it.
is very familiar for me. And the artwork, and absolutely. Yeah. This has been the forum of our relationship and our friendship. So it's a strange time. So do you have any? Obviously, this is very dramatic times for our whole community. But as a church leader and as a Christian, we are we're part of a different kingdom, and we've always got our eyes and ears and spirits tuned maybe to what God is up to. So. What do you think God's up to at this time? What's going on kingdom wise?
Well, I think that I think God is in some respects still wanting to do the same thing that He's always wanted to do, and that's be with us and allow us the opportunity to participate in His dream, right? Which is to draw others to Himself so that He can be with them. I don't think any of that changes, actually. But we're changing in the process. And I think sometimes in order to see things more clearly, you gotta put on a new set of lenses. We're both wearing these, as our eyesight changes as we get older. And I think we're having to put on new lenses to see God and see what He's inviting us into in a different way. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's painful and hard and difficult. But I think God is shockingly consistent. When we think everything is in turmoil, I think Dad just invites us to trust and rest, oddly enough, which is such a bizarre invitation when we get the sense that we're in turmoil and things are falling down around us. Dad invites us to still rest and trust in Him, which is
right. So talk about that a little bit, because I think maybe a lot of people came into this lockdown kind of going, oh, great, now I've got time on my hands. Like, oh,
Yeah.
look,
No.
so, my life's going to look so different, and I'm going to get all this stuff done, all these things I wanted to do, or maybe I'm going to sort my quiet time out or whatever. Like, but I think there's something really profound about what you're saying there about this invitation from God to rest. And it's actually something I found really difficult. I've been probably the busiest I've ever been, and I'm usually busy, and I'm probably the busiest I've ever been through this time. So, but absolutely that call, that invitation, it's more than an invitation, that call to rest. Talk to me about that. What's that been like for you? Like that, just sitting in the presence of God.
Yeah, I would say for me, rest does, and I don't use rest in the sense that, we get a nap in the middle of the day now, or, I'm still busy too, as busy as ever. I think I would prefer to rest more in the sense of where our trust and our confidence is. I think that as a pastor, some of my own personal reflection and journey is that I placed a lot of confidence in our Sunday gathering. We've got really great musicians at Yeovil, and I think I'm an okay communicator. But we have a system and a way of gathering and a way of doing church, a way of being Christians that I've placed some confidence in and a sense of assurance, and God is approving of this. And when all of that starts to crumble, then the question becomes, wait a second, am I resting in a program or resting in something other than God's invitation to trust and rest in Him, His presence with me, and then His call to serve and love and be present with others. So when I say rest, I don't mean a lot more time. Maybe I'm talking about where my confidence lies and where my trust and assurance lies. Is my trust and assurance in the things I do, or is my trust and assurance in the very presence of God with me by His Spirit, and relying on His guidance and direction and presence, rather than plans and programs and initiatives, that we think are good? Because when you can't do all that stuff, well, then where are we?
Right.
What we got?
And there's something profound in that presence, isn't there? I reflect back on what Henri Nouwen might talk about dwelling with us in the Spirit, dwelling with God, and God dwelling with us, and being in that space with God. But how does that speak into maybe how the church might reposition and reposture itself as we reimagine, rebuild our communities, our culture?
Yeah, I'm not sure I know yet. I think there's a long journey ahead of us here. I don't get the sense that this is over anytime soon. At least that's what a lot of us are thinking. So in some respects, it's kind of a hard question to ask. My wife was speaking with a pastor who has a big church down the highway, about 45 minutes to 50 minutes from us. And they, until this, would never have even dreamt of the idea of selling their building. But they're engaged in this thinking process and evaluating a real radical shift where they sell the building. We've never had one. We've only ever said we would own a building as a church community if it had strategic missional value, is how we talk about it. If it doesn't serve the needs of the broader community, then we wouldn't have one for ourselves. I don't know. I really don't know, Adam. I think that part of the tension of the moment is discovering that God is enough. His presence is enough. And then we're called to be present with others. Whether there's a building or great programs and strategies, it goes beyond that.
And I think that's part of it. And again, I'd love you to speak a bit more about that, because, as a church community, it doesn't have a building, but is in community, and is, things I know about your church. It's so focused on community and loving and being in community and loving a community. That some of what you're talking about actually relates to our spiritual formation, not just as individuals, but as a church community. What does our spiritual formation look like, that we are positioned differently in our community, or better able to connect with our neighbours, or the marginalised, or the people who are suffering, who maybe never thought they'd be the people who are suffering 3 or 4 months ago, but the world's changed and turned upside down. And what does spiritual formation look like for you as individuals, but also as a community?
Spiritual formation is a process of becoming like Jesus, and in asking the Holy Spirit to somehow shape us into the likeness of Jesus, where the things that God cares about are the things that we begin to care about. I think that there's a process of it's a transformational process where how do I say this, man? There's so many layers to spiritual formation and transformation. I would say one of the most significant things in my journey in the last number of years is a reawakening to this notion that God is creating a new humanity. He's creating a new people. And they are people who are in community and gathered around Jesus, and allowing Jesus to be leader and Lord of their lives. And we have the opportunity to mutually surrender to Jesus and to each other. And that is a challenging thing to do. And we are in that process. We go to the scriptures and we read the scriptures. We pray with one another. I think that some of the things that are emerging are ancient and old. Contemplation, meditation, practices are so important. We've relied so much on the formative experiences of church services, right? And this corporate prayer together, and celebrating, and music. And I think one of the things that we're realizing in this time is that when you can't do all that stuff, how do we continue to practice the presence of God among us? And I know for me, here in this room, there's not much left other than prayer and meditation and contemplation, going to the scriptures, discovering who Jesus is, experiencing his presence, and then when I'm with others, allow that to be the conduit that Jesus can then be present with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. It's beautiful. So what is the, as you've done that, and as you've seen your church do that, and what are the stories that have excited you about how your church is responding? And this doesn't have to be just your church, but the church in your area is responding.
I'm excited about a lot of stuff. Oddly enough, right? Like it's just fascinating how you continue to see things develop and change when it's so easy to be stressed out, and wondering what in the world's going on. One of the things I'm really excited about in my church is that people are I like to use the word popping. There are ideas that are coming forward that might not have come forward previously. So there's one guy he's trained as a therapist, and this prayer and contemplative practice has been something that he's done in his own life, but wanted to help others. And so he asks, can I do this? And Zoom, who knew that Zoom could be church, right?
Right.
Like, who knew? That's what we do. We meet every Sunday morning together on Zoom. We don't do live streaming and that kind of thing. I wanted to be able to see other people's faces and have a conversation. And that's kind of part of our ethos, but so anyway, Curtis he started this morning contemplative experience where people can Zoom in and encounter the ancient disciplines of prayer, contemplation, and meditation.
Right.
But then also seeing people just desperately trying to figure out, how do we continue to connect to the neighborhood, right? Because we do care about the neighborhood. Kingsdale is the location in our city, the neighborhood where we are, where we hold our Sunday gatherings and where we do a lot of ministry. And, to see city people joining our WhatsApp stream so that, communication can happen back and forth, and we can serve the needs of those in our neighborhood. It's been really exciting. There's parts of change that I really like. I tend to think ahead and try to think, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
And I'm loving seeing what seemed to be very small things become very significant, right? In our time, as things are kind of crumbling around us, the smallest things all of a sudden become really, really good,
Yeah, I think that's a real, it's a characteristic, I think, of this new. I think it's it's something that I've heard a few people say, like the simplicity of things sometimes, and the smallness of things that we would have missed before, or not taken time for before, or just taken for granted before. And then I think it's a characteristic of this new time, of this new landscape. And so, just following on from what you're saying there, because you're talking about people who are understanding what this looks like in their community and in their neighborhood, and as a church planter, and as somebody who coaches church planters, suddenly we have a whole bunch of people who are in their street, in their neighborhood, in their community, in their family. And where maybe they looked to the centralized church to do their discipling and to do their what church looked like, actually suddenly now we have this diaspora. We have a dispersal of people who are in their own context. Like what would you say to those of us who find ourselves in that situation? Kind of suddenly, well, even to some extent, are we all planting churches all of a sudden in our families, in our streets and in our neighborhoods? Like, are we? What were some of the things you would encourage us to do to maximize our opportunities with our neighbors, with our families, and with our communities?
Oh man, that's such a good question. Well, I would encourage you to think about what the gospel and what the good news really is and what it leads to. That would be the first thing. Does the gospel stop in its effect at someone finding Jesus and they're saved and then they get to go to heaven? Is that where it stops? I don't think so. Right? I think the large overarching story is that God is going to redeem and restore and renew all things, that everything is brought together, and that evil and sickness and disease and out of control viruses, all that stuff is healed and renewed and restored. And here we are under God's rule. And so part of our mission is not just to see souls saved, right? But the expression of the kingdom is where the peace and the shalom of God is experienced in the world. So this is one of the wonderful opportunities we have in our time. Our neighborhoods, there's all sorts of opportunities in our neighborhoods to bring the peace and the shalom and the goodness and love of God into our neighbors' homes. That can be difficult when we can't go into their homes, but in the experience of our neighborhoods, there can be peace and shalom that's experienced there. So, we're encouraging Unites to Sorry, that's what we refer, Unit is our church and we're a group of Unites. It just kind of comes out of my mouth now. We're encouraging Unites to, host a neighborhood gathering. I'm a musician and some of us are musicians, so we're doing driveway shows. So we've started going to our driveways of different Unites houses on a Saturday afternoon, and we set up a small sound system and we have a neighborhood party. And we tell everyone to stay on their lawns, pamphlets and flyers go out, and you can listen, you can dance, you can sing. And for us, we just, in this time of isolation and distance and everything else, God is still present with us. And so we want to send this message that there's still hope and there's still joy. And that's such a simple way to do it. And we've had conversations with neighbors saying, wow, this is amazing. What are you guys doing? It's like, well, there's still goodness and hope, Who are these musicians? Oh, they're from our church. A church, really? Wow, they're good. I like hearing they're good. That's a nice part. But I just think the opportunities are endless to offer small glimpses of hope and peace and goodness where there seems to be so much hate and disillusionment and violence in our time. There's people that are about a different thing, and Dad's about a different thing too. And we won't prop up violence, and we're going to prop up the peace and the shalom of God in the world.
I love how you refer to God as Dad. I love that. And what you're saying there is that that small thing, these small acts came up again. Noticing the small things, doing the small acts, and it just reminds me of this phrase that we use here sometimes at Yeovil Community Church that says that the kingdom of God is brought in one act of love at a time. And
that's right.
And sometimes we think that well, it's so small, it doesn't really do anything. It doesn't, unless we're having unless they're dropping on their knees and repenting and giving their lives to Jesus, was it all worthwhile or not? But actually, love is seen and experienced in the small things. Actually, I think many times more than in the big things, in the big gestures, and just that checking in on our neighbours, putting on a concert. I'm not going to put on a concert for my neighbours, but that's an act of love in itself. And but doing the small things is a beautiful thing, and just one act of love at a time brings that transformation.
Absolutely, right. Like we've been able to. We had an apartment building that burnt in the neighborhood where we at the community center where we hold our Sunday gatherings before COVID-19, and it burnt. And so Unites were all, the message went out. We've got people that need to be moved. We have furniture that we need to get. And Unites just came together and helped move people, and pictures on our WhatsApp stream of beds and appliances and things that Unites had at home that they could donate to families. Those kinds of things just and experiences, what they do for us, number one, to be involved in ministry and service of actual tangible needs is so important. But the message, how else can people know that God really is present and really loves them without these small acts? It's impossible. It's impossible. We just have to be tenacious about doing it.
Yeah, and you touched on something there as well, that actually when we serve, when we give, when we offer these acts of love, it saves our soul too. Like it does something in us. There was a beautiful video shared in our church on Pentecost by a lady in the church who'd been volunteering at the food bank. She was saying, this is so good for me. Like, this has been so restorative for me. Just the act of serving. isn't just good for the people that we serve, but it's good for our souls.
Yeah, really is. Yeah, you encounter Jesus in a new way, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think one of the challenges in our time, I don't know whether you've encountered this, but there is an anxiety that's in us if we go out, right? Like if we go out to
supermarket or wherever, right?
Right, like, and yet here's this invitation, the smallest of, when Jesus said a cup of cold water, man, like a cup of cold water to give it to someone who's thirsty, you've given it to me, right? Like there's this, we meet with Jesus when we do the simplest things, right? And of course, we know that to meet Jesus is a big deal.
Right.
Like how can something not change in us when
Right.
we actually meet Jesus? And I think
Beautiful.
Jesus is being totally serious there,
Right.
You do something small for the sake of someone who's in need. You're going to meet me in that moment.
Yeah.
And it's so true. How can it not be
Beautiful.
for us as well?
Oh, man, thanks so much. One final question for you, Evan.
Yeah.
Is there any scripture, a particular verse maybe that is just resonating with you at the moment in your spirit, in your soul, that kind of encapsulates what God is saying, what God is doing in you?
Yeah. Psalm 37:5. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he'll make your path straight. That's my life verse. And in times when things seem to be really stressful, or it feels like we're standing in the rubble, the invitation is always there. Commit yourself to me, surrender to me, right? I'm going to make your path straight. You might not know it, you might not know the way, but I'm here. So will you trust and will you rest, right? That I've got you, and I've got my people, and I've got the world. I've got Britain, right? I have not abandoned my people. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him. He'll make your path straight.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Great to speak to you again. I'm sure we'll be speaking again soon, but thank you so much for making the time for this. Really appreciate it.
Not a problem.
Thanks.
Grace and peace to you, my friend.
Yeah.